even raise this observation or impugn someone's reputation by noting this.
안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탁 왕코입니다. 근데 매일매일 운동 안 하고 있죠. 지금 어제도 운동을 못했습니다. 이 낮밤이 바뀌는 이 휴무 때조차도 비몽사몽으로 있어서 이 생활이 안 되네. 생활이 안 돼. 나이가 제가 지금 37살인데 저보다 나이가 많으신 분들이 군대 근무를 하시는 분들이 많습니다. 회사에서. 도대체 어떻게 생활이 가능한지. 여러분 건강 진짜 잘 챙기셔야 됩니다. 자, 운동하겠습니다.
Recent events of the last 4 years, the incredible cleaving to the flag that's happened in the right. You look at a Trump rally; it's a sea of American flags, from baseball hats to T-shirts to waving them, to protests against what the flag stands for by people like Colin Kaepernick, who took a knee because he didn't feel the flag represented him. That somehow this symbol that at its heart is of unity, right? There are 50 stars on it representing all 50 states, has become to many a symbol of division. And that's the question that the New York Times sought to explore.
So there's some interesting polling data. We'll put it up on the screen. It's from CBS. And it talks about going into this weekend, how likely, based on party, were you to be flying an American flag. 80% of Republicans, will you fly an American flag July 4th? Said yes. 58% of Democrats said yes. You can see, or perhaps you don't have a monitor, but over time, there has been a difference between R's and D's as to whether they fly the flag. Your reaction?
Well, it's absolutely a distinction, but it also goes deeper than that. There are differences polling data shows based on your race, how likely you are to fly or feel proud of that flag. I think it's something like 80% of white Americans say they feel proud of the flag, while closer to 60-something% of black Americans feel proud of that flag. And that speaks to how differently our life and race is lived in America, and that symbol of this country can mean different things based on who you are, party affiliation, or personal cultural experience.
You know, it's funny how some of these patriotic symbols get appropriated by one side or another. I happen to love Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. That it will cause me to stop in my tracks and get goosebumps. And yet that song is so affiliated with Republicans and not Democrats. I don't know what the Democratic song is to match against Lee Greenwood.
Well, isn't it fascinating that the American flag can mean so many different things? It was burned during the Vietnam War in protest of that war. Ribboned between the Twin Towers, it symbolizes a moment of unity of September 11th, of us all coming together against threats against this country. But then you saw it during the Capitol riots, used quite literally as a weapon. That American flag on a pole was used to beat police officers by people trying to make an incursion into the Capitol. And so that flag has shifted depending on who's wielding it, both metaphorically and quite literally.
Yeah, well, it's just sad. I mean, it seems like everything has broken along partisan ranks these days, maybe even displaying the American flag. How about this? We should all put up the American flag. Too late for this year, but if we all do it for next July 4th, I think it would be a positive step. I appreciated your piece, so thank you for being here, Sarah.
Thank you. I'll do one better. Let's use the American flag every day. We're all Americans.
Yeah, amen to that. Thank you. We heard from a newly free Bill Cosby this Independence Day weekend, speaking out in defense of his former Cosby Show co-star, who's facing fire for defending him. That controversy is next.
Korea Unique Venue.
This is the 100 Club, our look at companies that are 100 years old or older. The story of Steinway & Sons began in Germany in 1836 when cabinet maker Henry Engelhard Steinway made his very first piano. It would take nearly 2 decades before he would go on to start the company known today, in 1853 in New York City.
They wanted to build the piano by which all others would be judged.
In 1877, they began partnerships with universities.
They very early worked to have relationships through their dealer network with various musical schools, conservatories, and because of that, the name Steinway was there very early.
In a world of increasing automation, each instrument is still crafted by hand,
Oh shit.
even as the
그렇게 많이
company
힘들어.
embraces digital technology. And in 2015, their stereo system ushered in a keyless era for their pianos. Finding the harmony between adaptation and upholding tradition is what those here say will drive the brand into the next century.
My name is Sona Jabate, the Gambia's first professional female choir player. I'm currently in London, but one of the ways I make sure I reconnect is by playing my choir and teaching my son. This is the way that we maintain our tradition and culture.
I'm Robin Curnow in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories. On Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa in association with Dangote.
Just days after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction, the disgraced TV father speaking out. Cosby is slamming Howard University for reprimanding his former TV wife, Felicia Rashad, who celebrated his release. The actor, once seen as America's dad, will be a topic of conversation in this Sunday's new CNN original series, The History of the Sitcom. Here's a clip that was filmed before Cosby's conviction was overturned.
That great Thursday night lineup: Cosby, Family Ties, Cheers, Night Court.
NBC really created this idea of must-see TV. You're talking about 20 and 30 and 40 million people tuning in.
People say you were one of America's most successful fathers. I said, no, it was Bill Cosby. Cosby was number one.
With respect to what's happened of late, it's like hugely disappointing to all of us. But he set the standard for what a family sitcom was.
I need to note that Bill Cosby maintains his innocence against all sexual assault allegations. Our next guest, a former New York Times media reporter, has interviewed Cosby many times over the years. CNN media analyst Bill Carter joins us now to discuss the latest with Cosby and this Sunday's premiere of The History of the Sitcom on CNN. You know, Bill, I'm a product of the era, you too, when we all watched the same shows. Today, someone recommends a TV show to me, and even though I watch a lot of television, chances are I've never even heard of it. Half the country used to watch this show, right?
Absolutely. I believe it's the last show ever, last regular show ever, to get a 50 share, meaning at the time it was on, 50% of the people watching TV were watching The Cosby Show. It was almost Super Bowl-like in its popularity.
What was the legacy of this show before all his troubles?
Before his troubles, it was maybe the classic modern family show that also broke barriers, because obviously we hadn't seen an African American family presented in this way, and everybody watched the show, and it brought people together in an incredible way, and families watched it together. I watched it with my little children at the time, and it brought us together. We looked forward to it every week. It was an iconic show, a truly iconic show, and obviously it is not that anymore.
What can you tell us about those many interviews that you conducted with him over the years? What was he like in your interactions?
Well, he was very receptive to me, and we had a very good relationship. I always found him a little inscrutable, I guess is the right word. It was hard to always figure where he was coming from. He always was, sort of proselytizing for his point of view about the way black kids should dress and things like that. But obviously he was such an enormous star. He was incredibly welcoming to me. He invited me and my wife to the finale, taping of the finale. So we had a very good relationship. I wouldn't say we were friends, but we had a good professional interaction. And of course I never imagined any of this was going on. And I have to say, the people that I know involved in the show, the producers, Tom Werner and Marcy Carsey, they didn't know about this. This was an extraordinary thing that was going on, but it certainly undid all of this. I shouldn't say it undid all of this great work, because it's still a great show. What's sad, Michael, what's really sad, is that people don't come together as a family and watch the show again in the way they will sit down and watch Lucy or Seinfeld or Friends, that are these iconic shows that go on. And it should be that way. The Cosby Show was that way for families.
Yeah, you remind me of the Seinfeld sign-off. For me, that's the last that I can recall where it seems like the whole country gathered around the television to see how it was going to end. Question, is there a precedent for someone who has fallen from grace and was the star of a TV show, sitcom or otherwise, and what then happens to the legacy of that program thereafter?
Well, I can't, this is obviously one of a kind in terms of the just heinousness of the accusations. As you said, we have to say he has proclaimed his innocence, but the heinousness of these accusations. I mean, you do have, I guess you could cite Hogan's heroes and Bob Crane, and who of course wound up being murdered, and his, very checkered sexual life. But that's not an iconic show like this. This show, because the family aspect of it, and the fact that Cosby was looked on as America's dad. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that happened. And in the series, we have Malcolm Jamal Warner, who obviously played his son in the show, and he talks about this very sincerely. It's not like they're running away from it. They know the damage that's happened. This was a great piece of art, that's been tainted by the great artist who made it.
Yeah, a funny show. Bill Carter, thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
Be sure to tune in. The all-new CNN original series, The History of the Sitcom, premieres with back-to-back episodes Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, only on CNN. We'll be right back.
Air quality update in association with Copernicus, Europe's eyes on Earth. Air quality update in association with Copernicus, Europe's eyes on Earth.
wait no more. Amazing moments, amazing Thailand.
It's more than just a game. It's a way of life. Every pass, every shot, every goal brings us together. We travel thousands of miles so we can say we were there. We follow every moment and go where the game takes us, uniting in hope and watching together. It's more than just a game.
I'm Paula Garani in London, and this is CNN.
One Pet 50 Fathoms really established the design vocabulary of modern dive watches. It has a history and an authenticity that's very hard to match.
It dates back to the mid-1950s when French frogmen were dissatisfied with the options and they wanted something particular.
It was designed in collaboration with a guy named Captain Robert Malouvier, who was a French combat diver.
They briefed in this watch to have very specific attributes. They wanted a black dial, they wanted oversized numerals, and they wanted an external rotating bezel that could be lined up with a large minute hand to indicate to them exactly how many minutes of oxygen time they had left. And they wanted this watch to do all of that while glowing underwater at 90 meters. So it was a tough brief. Enter the 50 Fathoms. It did the job for the frogman, and it does the job for the modern man.
I'm Patrick Snell in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
That's it for us. Don Lemon tonight with my Sirius XM colleague Laura Coates starts right now.
Thanks, Michael. Nice to see you as always. And this is a special holiday edition of Don Lemon Tonight. I'm Laura Coates in for Don. And think about where we are tonight. As we wind down a holiday weekend celebrating Independence Day, you know, just 6 months ago tomorrow, violent insurrectionists tried to take over the United States Capitol. They tried to overturn the results of the election. They beat police to within an inch of their lives, hunted for lawmakers and the then vice president in the halls of Congress. They put up a gallows in front of the Capitol. They marched with a Confederate battle flag. All of that happened just 6 months ago, on one of the darkest days in this nation's history. And now, the big lie that fueled all that is still poisoning America and splitting the country in two. We saw it just this weekend in Philadelphia. Hundreds of white nationalists marching in the streets wearing tan pants, black shirts, and face coverings, chanting, "The election was stolen," and "Reclaim America."
Scared to take the mask off, too scared.
Police say they were members of a group called the Patriot Front. The Southern Poverty Law Center calls them a white nationalist hate group. So while a lot of us were watching parades and fireworks, white nationalists were marching openly in the streets of Philadelphia, in America divided. A lot to discuss tonight with CNN senior political analyst Ron Brown. Say, Ron, I'm glad you're here, but wow, what a night and a weekend it has been. Ron, we're finishing up 4th of July weekend. I mean, it's incredible after the year we've all had, the year and a half we've all had, to be able to gather together safely, but we're also about 6 months out from the insurrection, and clearly the democracy is still in peril. I mean, the divisions are still right there.
This is as fraught a July 4th or 5th, I guess, by now, as the nation has had really since the Civil War. I mean, we have questions about our fundamental cohesion as a country and the commitment to democracy through both political parties that we really haven't asked in a very, probably since the Civil War. I mean, 6 months after the insurrection, you have a Republican leadership that is working as hard as it can to block any serious inquiry into what actually happened, Trump's role in fueling it over months of the big lie, and at the same time, Laura, that big lie about the election is fueling what is the most broad attempt to roll back Americans' voting rights probably since the 1890s and the early 1900s at the end of Reconstruction. So all of this is not really just a question of litigating what happened in the past. It is having an impact today and tomorrow. And don't forget, Donald Trump may seek to regain the powers that he had in 3 years, and yet there's so much we don't know about how he used and abused them while he was in office.
And even if he doesn't himself, there are others who are trying to take a role as an elected official. I mean, check this out for the Washington Post, Ron. It says, looking ahead to 2022, Republican candidates are actually centering their pitches around Trump's false election claims. They say of the 700 Republicans who have filed initial paperwork with the Federal Election Commission to run next year for the Senate or even the House, apparently a third of them embrace Trump's election lie. I mean, that's extraordinarily dangerous to a democracy, isn't it?
Well, and also that 75% of Republican voters say they believe the lie. Look, I believe the macro trend that we are watching is that the fear of demographic eclipse is eroding the commitment to democracy in a significant portion of the Republican coalition. Not only reflected in the share that says they believe that the election was stolen, or in the actions that we are seeing in these red states, not only to make it harder to vote, but to also make it easier for political appointees to try to overrule election administrators in 2022 and 24. But look, there's polling showing that a majority of Republican voters now say the American way of life is disappearing so fast that we may have to use force to save it. And I think, Laura, the big question is, there's roughly somewhere between a quarter and a third of the Republican voters who are deeply uneasy with this trend in the party, who don't like the way Trump behaved after the election, who don't like the way others went along with trying to subvert the result. The question is, what do they do? Do they remain in a party where they are clearly now the subordinate wing, as evidenced by Kevin McCarthy disciplining Liz Cheney before he does Marjorie Taylor Greene, or do they begin to drift away until the party draws a brighter line between kind of the mainstream and these extremist elements that Trump gave so much oxygen to?
I mean, they also add this, your point about the demographic eclipse and other notions you're talking about. They say similarly, of the nearly 600 state lawmakers who publicly embraced Trump's false claims, about 500 face re-election this year or next. Most of them signed legal briefs on resolutions challenging Biden's victory, and at least 16 of them attended the January 6th protests in Washington. I mean, Ron, what does this tell you about just how pervasive the big lie is? It really is knocking on the door of the American electorate for perhaps terms to come.
Yeah, what it tells you, Laura, is that we are just in a break in the battle. I mean, it's not as if the threat to American democracy disappeared when Trump left office. The reality is, as I said, there is now a substantial core of the Republican coalition whose commitment to basic democratic principles is eroding. And that is an ongoing challenge. We saw from the Supreme Court last week that it is highly unlikely to do anything, the six Republican appointees on the court, to restrain what Republicans in the states are doing to make it tougher to vote. Democrats in those red states don't have the votes to stop what's advancing through those legislatures. The only lever Democrats have to try to shore up the democracy between now and 2022 and 24 is their ability to pass national legislation, both setting a nationwide floor of voting rights, but also safeguarding election administrators. They have the votes to do that in the House. They probably have 50. They probably have a plan that 50 Democrats can agree on in the Senate. And the core question, which I think the Supreme Court stripped away any fig leaf from, is will Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema agree to end the filibuster to allow it to pass? Right now, they are prioritizing protecting minority input in the Senate over minority rights in the country, and we'll see if that's a sustainable position all the way now through 2022.
Ron Brownstein, I heard the word probably and thought that should never be in the same sentence as rights and voting rights, probably getting to have them or not. Thank you for your time. Nice talking to you.
Thanks,
unfortunately, about this. You know, the 4th of July, this weekend, we also saw a white nationalist group march through the streets of Philadelphia, the noted birthplace of America, and they were chanting, "The election was stolen." I want to talk about this now with CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe, the former FBI deputy director. He's also the author of The Threat: How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump. Andrew, I feel like this is deja vu in the worst kind of way to see white nationalists marching through the streets in America yet again in a very short amount of time since the last time we've seen this. And I want to ask you that you're looking right now at the footage. Hundreds of members of a white nationalist group called the Patriot Front are marching, and they're chanting, "The election was stolen," and "Reclaim America." Now, when you see this on July 4th weekend, Andrew, in the birthplace of our country, I gotta know what goes through your mind.
Wow, Laura, so many things, right? I mean, there's just the raw offense of watching this on July 4th, on Independence Day, in the cradle of democracy. It's just stunning. But we have to step back from that and really get down into the weeds to understand how significant this is as a sign of where we are with extremist movements around the country. The Patriot Front is a group we all know well from Charlottesville. They started out as Vanguard America, and then in the aftermath of the mess, the disaster at Charlottesville, they rebranded themselves as the Patriot Front. They've now been engaged mostly in protest activity and distributing leaflets and things of that nature. So we don't have any specific acts of violence that I'm aware of to attribute to them. But this is a very, very bold move to put on a show like that in Philadelphia on Independence Day. And it's interesting to me, too, that they've tied their actions here to the big lie, to the claims of a stolen election. It shows you how powerful that lie is as an inspirational and motivational element to these extremist groups. Where it goes from here is the question that we should all be asking.
And of course, they're also echoing the statements the former president is continuing to make about an election being stolen and about the idea of reclaiming America, so to speak. And the insurrection was just 6 months ago. I mean, we continue to learn a lot about the role of the far-right group, Proud Boys, that were there. I mean, you're talking about Patriot Front and the idea of rebranding. Are groups like this growing, or are we seeing the same groups that are having this similar rebranding and coming out in different ways to articulate different concerns and grievances that are pretextual?
I think there's no question we're seeing an elevated level of activity among these sorts of groups. So among your racially motivated extremists, your white supremacists, your militia groups, separatist groups are clearly more active now than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly. You have to attribute some of that to the national spotlight that they have taken for themselves from things like the January 6th rally riot, and prior to that, the acknowledgement and kind of implicit, thumbs up that they've been given by our former president. Those sorts of signals are very powerful to these groups. It gives them the validation they need. It gives them the confidence they're looking for to go out and continue taking bolder and more aggressive moves. And I think that's what we're seeing around the country now.
Well, we'll look to what the DOJ is going to try to do more. We've heard from Attorney General Merrick Garland on this issue. Have to have you back on and talk about that. Thank you, Andrew McCabe. I appreciate hearing from you and your insight. Now I want to bring in, thank you. I want to bring in CNN political commentators Bakari Sellers and Scott Jennings. I'm so glad to have both of you on tonight. Let me start with you, Bakari. Look, I mean, white nationalists are chanting the election was stolen. Homeland Security officials are now warning of more violence this summer because right-wing conspiracy mongers seem to think that Trump will be reinstated in August. Trump is still pushing the big lie. I mean, the insurrection may have been 6 months ago, but this threat is not going anywhere, is it, Bakari?
It's not, but I also think that we have to regroup and understand that this started way before Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump is not the root cause of this. He's a symptom. He's emblematic of it. If we go back to 2008 with the election of Barack Obama and then the creation of the Tea Party in 2010, you begin to see this rising. You begin to see this bubbling up, and it was going unchecked. Even in 2015, we're 6 years away from just a few weeks ago when we remembered the victims of the Charleston massacre, when Dylan Roof went in and murdered 9 black folk on a Wednesday night in Bible study in church. And so this has been bubbling up. Donald Trump is not the cause of this, but he definitely has added gasoline to the fire. And the biggest problem that we have in this country is that the Republican Party cannot win without the xenophobes, the racists, the anti-Semites. And so they're having a great deal of difficulty pushing back on this and bringing our country together because they can't do without them.
Scott, I know you have a response to that. And also, can the GOP, can they extinguish what Bakari is talking about? He didn't start there, he didn't start the fire, but they have the tools to actually extinguish the flames?
Well, I think that if the Republican Party wants to win a national election, it's going to have to put some of these people in their place. These white nationalists, the folks that you showed video of earlier and that we've seen in Charlottesville and other places, they have to be repudiated, not just by Republicans, but by all Americans of all wings of the political spectrum. But the Republican Party cannot, should not, will not exist if it wants to be aligned with groups like this. Now, fortunately, I think there are a lot of Republican leaders out there at the grassroots level and at the national level who have no interest in these groups and no interest whatsoever in being aligned with them. And I hope that we see that manifest itself over the next few years. I think this issue of the election, January 6th, and the idea that the election was stolen is going to come to a head, not in 22, but in 2024. Eventually, there'll be a Republican nominee, and if it's not Donald Trump, that person is going to have to look into a TV camera and say, I accept the results of the last election. If they're not willing to do that, they're highly likely to lose the next election because the American people won't trust them with the highest office in the land. They can't be trusted with a basic fact like that.
Let me keep with you for a second, Scott, on this point, because I'll come back to you, Bakari, because the author of Hillbilly Elegy, who's now running for Senate in Ohio, he went on Fox today to say that he regrets since deleted tweets from 2016 calling Donald Trump reprehensible and saying that he was voting for Evan McMullin. I mean, aside from the idea of the disassociation, is this the price of admission for Republicans who are running in 2022 or going beyond 2024? Is it really about kissing the ring or nothing else?
Well, just raw political strategy, yes. I mean, it's very difficult to imagine someone running as an anti-Trump candidate in a big Senate primary getting a nomination, especially in a state like Ohio where that primary is taking place, where you have a number of very good candidates and highly qualified people who are running aggressive races. So I think you're going to see Republicans around the country saying things like what JD said today, which is, I regret what I said, he was a good president, he made some good decisions, they may wind up criticizing him here and there, but largely, yeah, raw strategy. These Republicans are going to have to adhere to some kind of complementary relationship with Donald Trump. This might help them in 22. I think Republicans may actually have a good midterm. I question whether this will help us in 24, but we've got a midterm to get through before that comes around.
I mean, Bakari, something about democracy should make the idea of kissing a ring distasteful to people. I mean, it really should. And also the Washington Post is reporting that in almost every swing state, someone is running for Secretary of State who has been pushing the big lie or even was at the insurrection. I mean, our democracy survived the 2020 election because of state officials who do value the rule of law. But what happens when those people are gone? And as Scott is talking about, the idea of having to accommodate or have this complementary relationship. What are your thoughts, Bakari?
So yeah, I think as much as I want to blame the Republican Party for, as Ron Brownstein so articulately put it, go through state legislature after state legislature and implement these voting rights laws that are just utterly regressive, the fact remains that the Democratic Party for a long period of time, we just simply did not take the court seriously. We did not take voting rights seriously. And we have Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin who will not abolish the filibuster for this simple fact to actually make sure and preserve democracy in this country. I mean, my good friend Scott Jennings will tell you that Mitch McConnell, who Scott knows really well, was unashamed to get rid of the filibuster to get them a Supreme Court justice. He was unashamed to get rid of the filibuster for things he thought were necessary to moving this country forward. I may disagree with those things, but I have to applaud the fact that he was, he actually had the courage enough to abolish the filibuster. Right now, Democrats don't have that courage, Laura, when it comes to something that you've been beating the drum on all night, which is democracy. And that's a shame. Until Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin get the courage to believe in democracy, it may just go down the toilet.
Scott, Bakari, thank you. Evan tells me, Scott, you're not going to disagree with Democrats dropping the ball, so I'll just leave it right there for a second. Something tells me that you're in agreement there, so we'll leave it. Gentlemen, thank you. Nice seeing you both. Next, the latest on the search and rescue mission in the condo collapse in Southside Florida. The death toll rising to 28 today, but 117 people are still unaccounted for. All that with a tropical storm taking aim at Florida.
They're diving in. There's maximum effort being applied, and it's going to go on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until we pull everybody out of that pile.
When the kids are home and those after-school cravings kick in, that doesn't have to be a recipe for eating junk food. Try whipping up a smoothie for the kiddos instead. They can be tasty and nutritious when made of strawberry. And the antioxidants in strawberries can help boost your immune system. Or try sweet potato to add a little more zing. Try blending sweet potato, cauliflower rice, almond butter, and then add some of your favorite spices like cinnamon and nutmeg or vanilla. This smoothie is packed with protein and fiber that can help kids stay full longer. And avocado toast can make for a great snack for older kids. Avocados are packed with healthy fats and fiber. For younger kids, keep it simple with yogurt and graham crackers or berries and yogurt. Yogurt is a great source for several nutrients, including bone-building calcium and muscle-building protein.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed. Our engine continues our impetus and momentum. My show brings you the latest news and top newsmakers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
This theatre will be filled with people and art and debate and energy, and so now we have to rely on the tools.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. There seems to be some confusion that maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going? And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
To understand Italy, you need to look at the food. Up here in the north, forget about pasta and pizza. This is the land of rice and polenta.
Stanley Tucci searching for Italy. Sunday on CNN. Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN. Connecting Africa.
Join me and Lenny Jokas as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, connecting Africa through leadership.
It gives hope that a Ghanaian can dream big and achieve their dream.
Saturday on CNN. In association with Afrexim Bank. Tech for Health.
Immersive experiences can be used to transform and accelerate our health.
Tech for Empowerment.
Breathe deeply.
This is Tech for Good.
Join me, Christy Stout, as we explore the technologies that could shape our world for the better.
Tech for Good, Saturday on CNN, in association with Samsung.
The death toll in the Surfside condo collapse rising tonight. 28 people now confirmed dead. 117 are still unaccounted for. This as the search and rescue